Well, good morning. Back on March 5th, we're all aware that we held a hearing at Walter Reed at the Medical Center and heard from Specialist Jeremy Duncan, from Annette and Del McLeod, and Staff Sergeant Dan Shannon about their experiences with military health care. The mold, the red tape, the frustrations, all of the situations that were reported and which frustrated all of you as well as the members of this panel. In preparation for the hearing today, we reached back out to all of those witnesses to find out what was going on with them, to ask if there's anything else they needed for help, to get their take on how things have improved or not improved, and what our committee needed to focus on, in their opinions, with respect to our sustained and hopefully vigorous oversight. Jeremy Duncan is at Fort Campbell fighting to rejoin his unit overseas in Iraq. Annette and Del McLeod have noticed some improvements, but they're still navigating through the retirement compensation process. And Sergeant Shannon's most recent experiences with military health care were recounted in the Washington Post less than 2 weeks ago. He's trying to leave Walter Reed, but he has faced some additional bureaucratic roadblocks, which I think General Schoonmaker can report have been overcome at this point in time. Sergeant Shannon did tell us something that I think gets to the heart of this matter. And he said, recommendations mean nothing until something is done with them, and that's exactly what this oversight is all about. At an April 17th hearing, we heard the recommendations of the Defense Secretary's Independent Review Group. Since then, the President's Commission, led by former Senator Dole and Secretary Shalala, issued their own recommendations. The purpose of today's hearing will be to ensure that these recommendations and the human faces and stories of our nation's wounded soldiers behind them aren't ignored or forgotten, which unfortunately has too often happened in the past, and also to make sure that our government is moving swiftly to address all of the problems that were identified. This morning we'll hear from top directors with the Government Accountability Office, Congress's investigatory arm, on where we're at. Instead of yet another commission or panel issuing recommendations, today we'll get the first independent assessment of the progress we've made and of the challenges and obstacles that may lie ahead. We're also going to hear directly from key officials in the Army, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, who have been tasked with fixing the problems and implementing all of the various recommendations. We've been told time and time again that things are improving, and that next to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, taking care of our wounded soldiers is the highest priority of our military. Well, I believe some progress has been made, especially through some of the Army's efforts to throw significant additional resources, energy, and manpower at the problem. I'd like to take a few moments to highlight some lingering concerns. We don't do this to focus on the negative. I do this because taking care of our wounded heroes is too important to not demand that we strive for the highest levels of care and respect, and that we do so with a sense of real urgency. A number of us in the subcommittee visited Walter Reed earlier this week. We had the privilege and honor to meet with our brave men and women recovering there, and here's what we heard. First, the disability review process is broken, plain and simple. It's burdensome, archaic, adversarial. We also heard stories of wounded soldiers so frustrated that they would tell us, and I quote, they were just giving up. Second, the challenges we face with traumatic brain injury, TBI, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, are immense. We heard stories about TBI stigma. That is, the soldiers were afraid to come forward for help out of fear that they'd get kicked out of the military. And third, quality control and oversight will be absolutely key going forward. While the Army has thrown significant bodies at the problem, we need systems to identify and reward great performers, and to identify and deal with those treating our wounded soldiers with anything but respect. These challenges and countless others won't be easy to overcome. For instance, we've known for a long time that the disability review process is broken, but we haven't had the will and the sustained focus to fix it in the past. Will the newly created Senior Oversight Committee, made up of top officials from the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration, be up to the task of urgently and finally fixing and reinventing the disability review process? Will our military be able to hire additional top nurses and psychologists, a key that the GAO has highlighted? Finally, what are we doing now to plan for the future? In my district of Massachusetts, instead of expanding and enhancing health services and retaining specialized personnel, the Veterans Administration officials continue to push for consolidation. They are limiting options for our veterans when, unfortunately, they will clearly be in high demand for years and years to come. As chairman of the National Security Subcommittee, we've made it a top priority to ensure that there is sustained congressional oversight and accountability so that all those who risk their lives for their country receive the care and respect that they deserve. And I've been routinely impressed by the seriousness and the vigor that the other members of this subcommittee have approached when they're dealing with this issue. It's vital that we continue to have open and public hearings and that we hear from rank-and-file soldiers as well as high-ranking generals and department heads. We've already had 3 hearings, and today's hearing will certainly not be the last. We hope that in the months to come we won't have to hear about how Sergeant Shannon had yet another bureaucratic roadblock thrust in his way in his 3-year odyssey to navigate the military health care system. Rather, we hope to hear about how enormously difficult problems were finally overcome with dedication, hard work, and ingenuity. So I want to thank all of these witnesses whose hard work and ingenuity certainly will be put to the test as we meet this task.